The old medic no longer celebrated New Year's. There had been a time when he did, when the night sky bursting into color meant hope, meant survival, meant another year lived instead of endured. Back then, laughter came easily. Back then, he had people. Now, the fireworks only reminded him of artillery. Each distant boom echoed like the past clawing its way back into his bones. He could almost hear the screams layered beneath the celebrations, the cries of soldiers he had held together with trembling hands, the ones who begged him not to let them die. Most of them had died anyway. The medic sat alone in his cabin, deep in the frozen frontier, where no one visited and nothing grew. A small fire crackled in the hearth, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. Old tools hung neatly in place, sterilized, maintained, ready. Always ready, even if no one came anymore. A chipped metal cup rested in his hand, filled with tea that had long since gone cold. He didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on nothing, lost somewhere between memory and silence. Outside, snow fell thick and steady, swallowing the world in white. The distant town, miles away, celebrated the coming year. Their faint cheers carried on the wind, fragile and far removed from his reality. He preferred it that way. Silence was easier. Silence didn't scream. The first knock almost didn't register. It was too soft, too deliberate. The medic blinked, his body stiffening as his mind slowly caught up. He tilted his head, listening. Nothing. Just the wind brushing against the cabin walls. He exhaled, muttering under his breath. Getting old. Then it came again. A knock. Slow. Heavy. Real. Every muscle in his body tightened. No one came here. Not traders. Not travelers. Not soldiers. Not anymore. The medic set his cup down with quiet precision and reached for the rifle leaning against the wall. His grip was steady despite the years. Some things never left you. Training was one of them. He moved toward the door in silence, boots barely making a sound against the wooden floor. His eyes scanned the room automatically. Exits, cover, distance. Old habits. War habits. The third knock came just as his hand reached the latch. Closer now. Waited. Like something large. The medic paused. Then, slowly, he pulled the door open. The cold hit him first, sharp and biting, carrying the scent of snow and something else. Something metallic. Blood. His gaze lifted, and the world stopped. A dragon stood at his doorstep. Not a storybook creature. Not some distant myth. A real dragon. Her massive form loomed through the falling snow, scales darkened with frost and streaked with blood. One wing hung uselessly at her side, the membrane torn and ragged. Her breathing was labored, each exhale sending a plume of heat into the freezing air. The medic's grip tightened on his rifle. Every instinct screamed at him to raise it, to fire, to survive. This was the enemy. He had seen what dragons could do. He had walked through fields of ash where entire battalions had been reduced to shadows. He had stitched men together while their skin still smoldered from dragon fire. He had buried friends because of creatures like this. The dragon lowered her head slightly, and the medic froze. There was no aggression in her movement, no threat, only exhaustion, and something else, something he couldn't name. Then he saw it. Held carefully between her jaws was a small bundle, wrapped not in cloth, but in her own wings. She stepped forward once, slow and deliberate, and placed it gently on the ground at his feet. The medic stared. For a moment, his mind refused to understand what he was seeing. Then the bundle shifted. A tiny sound escaped it, weak, fragile. A hatchling. It was no larger than a house cat, its body trembling as it struggled to breathe. Its scales were cracked and uneven, faintly glowing beneath the damage like dying embers. One wing was torn nearly in half, the delicate membrane hanging loose. Blood stained its small form. Too much blood. The medic's breath caught. No, he whispered. The hatchling's chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven gasps. Each breath seemed like it might be its last. The dragon lowered her head further. Not in dominance, not in warning, but in something far more unfamiliar. She bowed. The medic felt something twist painfully in his chest. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. Dragons didn't bow. They didn't ask. They took. But this one waited. Her golden eyes locked onto his, filled not with fire or fury, but with something raw and desperate, pleading. The wind howled between them, carrying snow across the threshold. The world seemed to shrink, narrowing to just the three of them, an old man, a dying hatchling, and a mother who had nowhere else to go. The medic looked down at the small, fragile creature, then back at the dragon. His mind screamed at him to shut the door, to end this before it began. This wasn't his fight. The war was over. He had done enough, lost enough. But his hands had already started moving. Slowly, cautiously, he knelt. The hatchling was burning with fever. Even without touching it, he could feel the heat radiating from its tiny body. Infection, shock, internal damage. It wouldn't last the night, not without help. The medic closed his eyes for a brief moment. Damn it, he breathed. The oath. It never really left you, no matter how much you wanted it to. He opened his eyes and reached down, carefully lifting the hatchling into his arms. It weighed almost nothing. Too light, too fragile. The dragon tensed, but did not move. The medic looked up at her. If you wanted it dead, he said quietly, you wouldn't have brought it here. A long pause. Then he stepped back from the doorway. Get inside. The dragon hesitated. Snow gathered along her wounded wings, the cold biting into exposed flesh. She looked at the medic, at the hatchling. Then, slowly, carefully, she crossed the threshold. And everything changed. Too. The moment the dragon crossed the threshold, the cabin changed. Heat rolled in with her, thick, suffocating, alive. Frost along the walls melted instantly, dripping in thin rivulets down the old wood. The fire in the hearth flared brighter, as if reacting to her presence. The medic ignored it. His world had narrowed to the small, broken creature in his arms. Table, he muttered to himself, already moving. He cleared space with one sweep of his arm, tools, cloth, old notes scattering aside, and gently laid the hatchling down. Up close, the damage was worse, much worse. The tiny body trembled uncontrollably. Its breathing was shallow, irregular. Blood seeped slowly from beneath cracked scales, pooling against the worn wood. The medic's jaw tightened. Shouldn't even be alive, he whispered. Behind him, the dragon shifted, her massive form barely contained within the small cabin. She lowered herself slowly, every movement controlled despite the obvious pain in her broken wing. Her eyes never left the hatchling. Not for a second. Stay there, the medic said without turning. And don't touch anything. The dragon stilled. Whether she understood the words or simply the tone, he couldn't tell. Didn't matter. The medic moved with quiet urgency. His hands, old, scarred, steady, fell into a rhythm he hadn't used in years. Muscle memory took over where thought would only slow him down. Clean the wound. Stop the bleeding. Stabilize the patient. The steps were the same. Didn't matter if it was human or not. He grabbed a cloth, soaked it in heated water, and began carefully wiping away the blood. The hatchling let out a faint, pained chirp, its body twitching weakly. Easy, easy, he murmured. Its skin, no scales, were hot to the touch. Fever burning fast. Too fast. Infections already set in. He reached for a small metal case and snapped it open. Inside were vials, some nearly empty, some long expired. Supplies from a war that no longer needed him. Until now. Let's see what still works, he muttered. Behind him, a low rumble filled the room. The medic paused. Slowly, he glanced back. The dragon's gaze was locked onto him, her body tense, her claws digging into the wooden floor. A warning. Protective. Relax, he said flatly. If I wanted it dead, I wouldn't be doing this. The dragon didn't move, but the rumble faded. That was enough. He turned back to the hatchling. The torn wing was the worst of it. The membrane was shredded, nearly severed along one edge. Without proper repair, it would never fly. Maybe never move it again, if it lived that long. All right, the medic breathed. We start here. He threaded a needle. The hatchling stirred weakly as he worked, its small body flinching at each touch. Its strength was fading fast. Stay with me, he said, more firmly now. You don't get to quit. The word surprised even him. He hadn't said that in years. Time blurred. The medic stitched slowly, carefully, pulling torn edges together with practiced precision. Each motion was deliberate, efficient, controlled. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the only sounds were the crackle of fire, the scratch of thread through scale, and the uneven breathing of something fighting to survive. At one point, the hatchling went still. Too still. The medic froze. His fingers hovered over its chest. No movement. No breath. "No," he said quietly. He pressed 2 fingers gently against its neck. Nothing. The room seemed to shrink. The fire dimmed. And for a brief, terrible moment, he was back there. Another battlefield. Another body. Another life slipping through his hands. "Not again," he growled. He moved instantly. One hand braced the tiny body. The other pressed down gently, rhythmically. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on, damn you." No response. Behind him, the dragon let out a low, rising sound, fear creeping into it, raw and uncontrollable. The medic ignored it. He leaned closer, forcing air into the hatchling's lungs, then pressing again. "Breathe." Nothing. Again. Again. "Don't you dare." The hatchling jerked. A sharp, broken gasp tore from its throat. The medic froze. Then, a weak, flickering pulse returned beneath his fingers. Alive. Barely, but alive. The dragon collapsed. Not physically. She was already low to the ground, but something inside her gave way. A deep, trembling sound escaped her chest, quieter now. Not a roar, not a growl. Something softer. Relief. The medic sat back slowly, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. His hands trembled faintly now, the adrenaline beginning to fade. "Stubborn," he muttered. He resumed his work, more gently this time, more carefully, because now it had a chance. Hours passed. Midnight came and went unnoticed. Somewhere far away, fireworks lit up the sky in bursts of color and sound. But inside the cabin, the war was quieter, more intimate, a battle fought in breaths and heartbeats. And slowly, the hatchling stabilized. Its breathing evened out, still weak but steady. The fever hadn't broken, but it hadn't worsened either. For now, that was enough. The medic leaned back in his chair, staring at the small creature resting on the table. "You're not dying tonight," he said softly. Across the room, the dragon lifted her head. Their eyes met. No words passed between them. None were needed. The medic exhaled, long and tired. "Happy New Year," he murmured. And for the first time in years, it didn't sound empty. Morning came slowly, not with warmth, but with a pale, gray light that filtered through frost-covered windows, painting the cabin in cold silence. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside buried under a fresh, untouched blanket of snow. Inside, the air was heavy. Still, the kind of quiet that followed something fragile, surviving the night. The medic hadn't slept. He sat slumped in his chair beside the table, arms crossed, head tilted forward slightly, but his eyes remained open, watching, always watching. The hatchling lay where he had left it, wrapped in clean cloth, its tiny chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. The glow beneath its cracked scales pulsed faintly now, not dying anymore. "Fighting. Good," the medic muttered under his breath. Across the room, the dragon hadn't moved much either. She lay coiled near the wall, her injured wing tucked awkwardly at her side, her massive body barely fitting within the cabin. Frost had melted entirely around her, leaving damp wood and the faint scent of heat in the air. But her gaze never left the hatchling. Not once. The medic noticed. "Didn't think your kind had it in you," he said quietly. No response. Of course not. Still, something in her eyes shifted slightly, as if she understood more than she should. The medic pushed himself to his feet with a grunt, joints protesting loudly. "Let's see what kind of miracle you pulled off," he said, stepping closer to the table. He peeled back the cloth carefully. The wounds were holding. The stitching hadn't torn. Bleeding had stopped. The infection hadn't spread further, at least, not visibly. But the real problem remained. Energy. He frowned. Dragons don't run on blood alone. He remembered that much. Back during the war, there had been reports, half classified, half whispered among medics who treated burns and survivors. Dragons generated heat internally, stored energy, something deeper than simple biology, something closer to a furnace. And this one was running out. He reached out and placed 2 fingers lightly against the hatchling's chest. Faint warmth. Too faint. Yeah, he sighed. That's not going to cut it. Behind him, the dragon stirred. He turned slightly. She had lifted her head, watching him again, more intently now. Like she was waiting, trusting. The thought unsettled him. Don't look at me like that, he muttered. I'm figuring it out. He moved to his shelves, scanning what little he had left. Herbs, basic medicines, old stimulants. Nothing designed for this. Of course not, he scoffed softly. Why would I have dragon medicine lying around? He paused. Then his gaze shifted to the fire. Flames flickered low, steady, controlled. Heat, energy. A thought sparked. Maybe. He moved quickly. The medic adjusted the hearth, feeding it more wood, building the fire higher, but not wild. Controlled heat. Focused. Then he carefully lifted the hatchling again. It barely reacted. Too weak. Stay with me, kid, he murmured. He placed it closer to the fire. Not directly in it. Not enough to harm, but enough that the warmth began to seep into its fragile body. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the faint glow beneath its scales flickered. Stronger. The medic leaned in, watching closely. Come on. The glow pulsed again. And this time, it held. Behind him, a low sound filled the room. Not fear. Not warning. Something softer. Hope. The medic didn't turn around. Yeah, he said quietly. I see it too. Minutes passed. The hatchling's breathing deepened slightly. Its body relaxed, just enough to suggest it wasn't slipping away anymore. Not yet. All right. The medic exhaled. That buys you time. He gently adjusted its position, ensuring the heat reached it evenly. Then he stepped back. For the first time since the night began, he allowed himself to breathe. A shadow shifted beside him. The dragon had moved closer. Carefully. Slowly. Every motion deliberate, as if afraid she might break something just by existing too close. She lowered her head beside the table, her massive form looming, but controlled, restrained. The medic glanced at her. Up close, he could see it now. The damage. Scars layered over scars. Old burns. Deep cuts. Fractured scales that had healed wrong. And then, the mark, burned into her side. He went still. No, he whispered. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. He knew that symbol. He wished he didn't. A brand. Military. Not his, but close enough. Used during the war. Used on dragons that weren't born into battle, but forced into it. They used you, he said quietly. The dragon didn't react outwardly, but her eyes changed, darkened, and that was answer enough. The medic's jaw tightened. Memories surged back, brief, violent flashes. Chains. Control rigs. Handlers shouting commands while dragons screamed in rage and pain. Weapons. Just like the soldiers. Just like him. He let out a bitter breath. Guess we were on the same side of hell after all. The dragon lowered her head, slightly. Not submission. Not weakness. Understanding. The medic looked back at the hatchling. So small. So fragile. And already caught in a world that would tear it apart if it got the chance. Not this one, he said softly. The dragon's gaze snapped back to him. Sharp. Focused. He met her eyes. As long as it's here, he said, voice steady despite the weight behind it. It's not a weapon. A long pause filled the room. The fire crackled softly. The hatchling's faint glow pulsed between them. Then slowly, the dragon lowered her head. Not in desperation this time. Not in fear. But in something deeper. Something earned. Trust. The medic nodded once. Yeah, he murmured. We'll see how long that lasts. Outside, the world remained quiet. But deep in the distance, something stirred. And neither of them noticed. The warning came too late. The medic was standing by the window, staring out at the endless white horizon, when a distant vibration crept through the frozen ground. Subtle at first, barely noticeable. Then it grew. A low, mechanical hum. His eyes narrowed. Damn it. He knew that sound. Engines. Not civilian. Behind him, the dragon reacted instantly. Her head snapped up, body tensing, claws digging into the wooden floor. A low growl rumbled from her chest. Deep, instinctive, dangerous. The hatchling stirred weakly on the table, its faint glow flickering with the sudden shift in tension. The medic moved fast. He grabbed his rifle from the wall and stepped closer to the window, wiping away frost with the back of his hand. Shapes emerged through the snow. Dark, angular, armored. 3 vehicles. Military. "Of course they found you," he muttered. He glanced back at the dragon. "They're not here for me." Her eyes burned now, not with fear but readiness. Violence coiled beneath her skin, like a waking storm. "No," the medic said sharply. She froze. "Not like this." He stepped toward her, his voice low but firm. "If you lose control in here, you kill it." He gestured toward the hatchling, and everything else. The dragon's gaze flicked to the table, to her child. Her muscles trembled. Then slowly, she eased back. The growl faded. Outside, the vehicles came to a halt. The hum of engines died, replaced by the sharp crunch of boots on snow. The medic sighed. "Stay," he said, glancing once more at the dragon. "Protect it." He didn't wait for a response. He already knew what she'd do. The door creaked open as he stepped out into the cold. The wind bit at his face instantly, sharp and unforgiving. Snow swirled around him as he closed the door, behind him, with deliberate care. 3 soldiers stood ahead, armored, disciplined, weapons raised, but not yet fired. One stepped forward, helmet gleaming faintly in the pale light. Occupant of the structure. A voice crackled through external speakers, distorted but clear. "You are harboring classified biological assets. Surrender them immediately." The medic stared at them. Same tone, same words, different war. "Assets," he repeated quietly. The soldier didn't react. "Failure to comply will result in forced retrieval." The medic shifted his grip on the rifle. His fingers didn't tremble. They hadn't in years. "Let me guess," he said. "You don't care if they survive the process." Silence. Then, "Compliance is your only option." The medic let out a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah," he said. "Heard that before." For a moment, no one moved. Snow drifted between them, the wind carrying it in soft, restless waves. The medic's gaze hardened. Behind him, inside that cabin, was something that trusted him. Something that shouldn't have. Something he refused to fail. He raised his rifle. "Come take them." The first shot shattered the silence. The medic fired before they could react, the recoil kicking into his shoulder as one soldier staggered back, armor sparking from the impact. Not lethal, just enough. The others responded instantly. Gunfire tore through the air, sharp and deafening, rounds slamming into the cabin walls, kicking up splinters and snow. The medic moved. Fast, old but not slow. He dove behind a snow-covered crate just outside the cabin, using it as cover as more shots cracked past him. "Still got it," he muttered under his breath. Years peeled away in seconds. This wasn't new. This was familiar. Inside the cabin, the hatchling whimpered. The dragon snapped. The door exploded outward, which shattered as a massive force burst through it, heat and fury flooding into the open air. The soldiers froze. For just a fraction of a second. But that was enough. The dragon surged forward, her wounded wing dragging, but her body still a weapon of terrifying power. Fire flickered between her jaws, not wild, but controlled, focused, protective. "Fall back," one soldier shouted. Too late. The dragon roared, not a mindless blast of destruction, but a precise wave of heat that forced the soldiers to scatter, breaking their formation. The medic didn't hesitate. He moved with it. Shots rang out again, this time his, picking off weak points, forcing the soldiers further back, keeping them off balance. They worked together, not planned, not coordinated, but instinctive. One soldier raised a heavier weapon. The medic saw it. "Down," he barked. The dragon reacted instantly, dropping low as the weapon fired, an explosive round slamming into the ground behind her, sending snow and debris into the air. Too close. Way too close. The medic's expression darkened. "Yeah," he muttered. "Not happening." He shifted position, taking aim, and fired. The heavy weapon dropped from the soldier's grip as he went down hard, armor sparking violently. The remaining soldiers hesitated. That was all it took. The dragon stepped forward. Slow, deliberate, Fire building in her throat. Not unleashed, but ready. A warning. Not a threat. A promise. Stand down. The medic called, his voice cutting through the chaos. Or you won't be walking away from this. The wind howled. Snow swirled. The soldiers looked between the old man and the dragon beside him. Something shifted. Not fear. Calculation. Fall back, the leader ordered. Reluctantly, the soldiers began to retreat, dragging their wounded with them. Weapons stayed raised, but they didn't fire again. Not this time. The engines roared back to life. The vehicles turned, and slowly, they disappeared into the storm. Silence returned. Heavy, uncertain. The medic lowered his rifle slowly, his breath steady despite the fading adrenaline. That'll bring more, he said. Beside him, the dragon exhaled a long stream of heat into the cold air. Not in anger, not in rage, but in quiet acknowledgement. The medic glanced at her, then back at the cabin. Let's make sure it was worth it, he muttered. And together, they turned back inside. The cabin felt different after the fight. Not broken, though the door hung in splinters and cold air drifted freely inside, but changed. The silence that followed wasn't the same empty, quiet the medic had grown used to over the years. This silence was shared, alive. The medic stepped inside first, lowering his rifle against the wall with a tired exhale. His body ached now, the kind of deep, bone-heavy exhaustion that came after adrenaline burned out. Remind me, he muttered, rolling his shoulder, why I keep doing this. Behind him, the dragon entered more carefully this time. No urgency, no panic. Her movements were slower, controlled, but no less powerful. She paused just inside, her gaze sweeping the cabin, checking, always checking. Then it landed on the table, on the hatchling. It was still alive. The faint glow beneath its scales pulsed stronger now, more consistent. The warmth from the fire had spread through its small body, stabilizing what little strength it had left. But it was still fragile, still one step from slipping away. The medic moved to it immediately. Let's see what all that trouble bought us, he said quietly. He unwrapped the cloth carefully. The wounds held. No fresh bleeding. Breathing steady. Weak but steady. He nodded once. Good, he murmured. Behind him, the dragon let out a low breath. Relief. The medic reached for a small vial from his kit, one of the last he had. He hesitated for a moment, staring at it. Was saving this, he muttered. For what, he didn't say. Didn't need to. He uncorked it anyway. Guess I found out. He worked slowly, adding what little he could to support the hatchling's recovery, binding, adjusting, reinforcing. But the truth sat heavy in his mind. This wasn't enough. Not long-term. Not out here. They'll come back, he said finally. The dragon's head lifted slightly. They always do, he continued. Bigger force. Better weapons. Less patience. He didn't sound afraid. Just certain. He leaned back slightly, looking at her. You stay here, it dies. The words hung in the air. Simple. Unavoidable. The dragon stared at him, unblinking, waiting. The medic exhaled slowly. Which means we don't stay. The idea settled between them. Strange. Dangerous. Necessary. He stood, stretching stiffly, and began moving around the cabin with renewed purpose. Old bags. Supplies. Tools he hadn't touched in years. He packed quickly, but carefully. Not like a man running. Like a man preparing. You're not the only one they used, he said as he worked. The dragon watched him. I walked away from the war, he continued. Figure that was enough. He paused, then shook his head. Turns out it's not. He moved to the table and gently lifted the hatchling again. This time, it stirred slightly in his hands, a faint, weak movement. Alive. Still fighting. The medic allowed himself a small smile. Yeah, he murmured. You've got some fight in you. The dragon stepped closer. Slowly, carefully, her massive head lowered beside him, her eyes fixed on the hatchling in his arms. There was no fear in her now. No desperation. Just something steady. Something stronger. Trust. The medic met her gaze. I can't fix everything, he said plainly. Not out here. A pause. But I can try. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, The dragon lowered her head, not in desperation, not in pleading, but in agreement. The medic nodded once. "All right," he said. "Then we do this properly." Outside, the sky had begun to change. The gray clouds parted slowly, revealing the first true sunrise of the new year. Pale gold light stretched across the snow-covered land, casting long shadows and turning the frozen world into something almost peaceful. The medic stepped out of the cabin, the hatchling wrapped carefully in his arms. The dragon followed behind him, this time not as something broken, but as something standing. He looked out across the horizon. Miles of wilderness, unknown paths, uncertain future. He hadn't left this place in years, hadn't wanted to, but now there was a reason. "Well," he said, adjusting his grip slightly, "let's not waste it." The hatchling let out a faint sound, soft, weak, but alive. A tiny flicker of flame escaped its mouth, barely more than a spark. The medic blinked, then chuckled. "There it is," he said. Beside him, the dragon let out a low, steady rumble. Not fear, not anger, something deeper, something proud. The medic glanced at her. "You don't have a name, do you?" he asked. Of course, she didn't answer. Still, he thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said. "Guess we'll figure that out on the way." He took his first step forward. The snow crunched beneath his boots. The dragon moved beside him, not behind, not ahead, beside. And together, they walked into the light of a new year. Not as enemies, not as survivors, but as something the war had never allowed them to be. A beginning.